Okay, episode 2 of this special series that we are doing. Today's topic is going to be on elite dieting or eating disorder. And we're excited to chat about this and share our thoughts and perspectives on this. Of course, if you're just jumping into the series now, I'm sharing from a psychological, mental health professional perspective. And Adam has a lot of that amazing knowledge too. And Adam's sharing from his incredible background as a coach. So, Adam, why don't you start us off on this one?
Yeah, first I was mentored under Dr. Corey Probst, who's she was the psychological director of the Diet Doc back in the day. So she dealt with a lot of eating disorder type behavior, primarily physique athletes. So I was really blessed to get guided by her in this because it's something, my coaching is a little more female dominated. I do get some men who actually will come to me with some issues, which is awesome when they finally do. But I do face this a lot with, maybe women I get from other teams, or, we had a long national run because you're in the top 3 for a potential pro card show after show after show, and you're going to keep going. You just know you're going to typically fight another wave with a longer prep potentially. And I think it's kind of nice because I think as a coach, I've done this long enough that I have almost a spidey sense to it now, much more so than I did before. So yeah, just to give you a little bit of my background on, what I've done and how I've experienced this. But I loved when we were brainstorming on topics that we came together as this being one of the ones we were going to speak about.
Yeah, and mainly that was because we were talking about how a lot of people will look from the outside in and say this person has disordered eating by living this lifestyle, or I have to go to some extreme lengths to get there. And actually, something that I was like, I have to mention this when we record. So, current Miss Bikini Olympia, Maureen, she did a story post on questions. Like you could ask her a question. Someone asked her body measurements, and she was like, I've never taken body measurements before. I have no idea. And that surprised me. And then she was talking about like food and how she's only followed a meal plan. So I thought about our last episode, and it just made me want to share on this particular topic that sometimes you will assume someone's doing all these things to be elite. And it's an easy sell. Honestly, for coaches, it's an easy sell to be like, oh, you need to be 110% on all these areas. But really, I think that if you're living this lifestyle, you find positive reasons to live it, that is already a protective factor from an eating disorder. Because the thing that sets apart an eating disorder from just, following a diet that's strict and it's getting you somewhere is that it's negatively affecting your life. An eating disorder is negatively affecting your life in some way, and it's negatively affecting and impacting your mental health in some way. That's when it becomes like obsessive and it's all you think about and you can't live your life normally. If it affects daily life, that's generally what we would consider disordered when it comes to the DSM. It's a whole separate topic, but anyways, just to kind of paint the picture between the difference is even there's been research on bodybuilders, actually little research, but some that shows even though that female elite athlete displays similar tendencies as someone with an eating disorder, it does not mean they display the same psychological tendencies. And I think that's the key. The behaviors are behaviors, but it's the intention and it's the thought process that goes behind it that leads it to being disordered.
Mm-hmm. Diagnosing yourself with a eating disorder, and there's tons of apps out there that, will kind of ask you questions. And, I think that those apps are, one, made to sell you on something, and two, you just really always need a personal opinion and perspective. I had a client recently come to me. We're post show, 2 national shows together, and she said, I binged on pizza last night. And I'm like, well, how much did you have? And she was like, probably 3 or 4 slices. I said, well, what did you call that before you competed? And she was like, definitely not a binge. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm getting at. I'm like, so you just normally went out with your family and had some pizza last night, right? And she's like, that's a really good perspective. And I was like, yeah. I said, you're going to have a lot of comparisons because now you're an elite dieter. You've really taken things to the extreme. So just because you're getting back to normal life doesn't mean you're off track or, necessarily binging. So one, don't call it a binge. And two, kind of stop calling it a disorder, because you do have control of it. And the thing that you are losing control of is your psychology behind what it is, how you're doing it, and why you're doing it. It's not like you just ordered pizza by yourself alone and ate the whole thing, or maybe done it multiple times. You went out with your family and had a good time. And this is behavior I applaud as a coach. It's somebody who's relatively genetically gifted. I mean, obviously, they made it to nationals. I do find some of those clients just have a little bit more wiggle room, and we had already reversed into the show, so they were good to go. Like, they had a pretty fast metabolic rate, so I wasn't even worried about it as much as they were.
That's one of my favorite perspectives you bring to the table is like how often athletes are labeling something that's out of the norm for an elite athlete, and especially in this sport. And you're saying, just because it looks different doesn't mean it's abnormal or it's disordered. It's actually quite normal, to enjoy 3 slices of pizza. And I think what goes behind that as well is like, if we look at diagnostic criteria, we're looking at the speed of which the food was eaten in comparison to other meals that you eat. We're looking at like what the intention was behind it. Maybe you were alone. That's pretty common with binging. And we're looking at it, how often it's happening per week. The other thing to keep in mind is some people are physiologically really hungry and it leads to overeating. But when you zoom out, it's not really overeating when you're in a deficit. You probably just ate up to a level that your body was asking for. Now, I believe you can overcome that as a competitor and be elite as an athlete and not let those types of physiological cues or signals lead you down that road of taking action that you're not proud of. And that's also the difference is like, we're not calling it disordered. We're just calling it a normal response to physiological demands being placed on you as a competitor. But the mental side of things is where you need to work so then you can overcome those types of demands. And it's not about labeling ourselves. It's about working on the things that are keeping us from having the most fulfilling and empowering preps and improvement seasons. But the labels are where people start getting stuck, because then they see themselves as a binge eater. They see themselves as a dieter, and they take on a dieter's mentality. And so that identity starts to consume them when they don't fulfill all the expectations they've attached to that identity. So when I'm working with someone and they're expressing these concerns to me, I try to relieve them of the weight of, I'm a disordered eater, or I have an eating disorder, or I am my eating disorder. No, you're not. You're going through something. You're facing this. You're struggling with this, but it's not the defining factor of you as a person or as an athlete.
Absolutely. Another concept I see people kind of talking about is I missed my reverse, or I messed up my reverse. And well, truthfully, if you're overeating, you're reversing. You just overshot it by a lot. And the other thing I kind of wanted to bring to that too, outside perspective, I see a lot of girls who maybe didn't make it to the stage because they couldn't stick to the demands of the diet, and they, you know, self-diagnose themselves with an eating disorder. And, I could never bench press 315. I could only do 305. I don't have a bench press disorder. I just couldn't bench press at an elite level. And that's okay. I had other strengths. I was great at training. I was great at bringing intensity into the gym. And there's a lot of naysayers out there who are going to raise that flag because they want a whole group of women who can't do it with them, and that's okay. I just think there's a whole lot of demonizing competing and demonizing the diet to keep people from getting to their goals. People want to see you not succeed, especially if they tried it and they could not do it. And there's such a larger number of people who could not do this process that are on social media having like kind of woe is me mentality or diagnosing themselves with issues just to make it look that much worse, to scare people from not doing it, or scare people from doing it in general. And I really want people to be aware of that, and also be aware of who you're making friends with, because those are the people, as soon as you say, hey, I kind of feel this way too, they get their claws into you and you're going to go down. You'll definitely never compete because you're stuck with a negative person who couldn't do it. You know, this is why we have idols, and I don't understand why people don't catch this, because it's such a mindset shift to like go that direction. But you know, the strong will survive in a contest prep. And that really is just the truth of it. Like, you're probably going to have to go lower calories. Like, a coach can't change your genetic capacity. Like, and if a coach tells you, you know what, you'll be on high food and low cardio, well, congratulations to that coach, because they're poaching all the elite people out there, or the people with really great genetics. Like, yeah, you should have some people who probably have some higher calories than others. And but you're going to find some trends where a lot of people just need to suck it up and diet hard, or we need to find the mistakes in their diet and, you know, come forward and have you know, good communication about that, which is another topic that we're, you know, going to talk about, is like the difficult conversations piece. But I just kind of wanted to throw all those things out there, because this is kind of where sometimes that eating disorder crowd that's demonizing competing can really take you down a really negative rabbit hole. And I just kind of want people to be aware of that. Make this your own journey. You know, don't necessarily join somebody in forces who's having the same thing, unless you're getting like couples therapy together, you know, like working through the issue. Because these people, what are they doing to help themselves out of that disorder other than just posting about it on social media?
Correct. And honestly, like whenever I see this, there's this like boxer in me that's like, hold me back, hold me back, because I can't stand it. And why I can't stand it, I've been that person. I was the jaded competitor after my first show. I was blaming competing for everything. And then guess what? I took personal responsibility for my life, for my behaviors, and for my psychology. That is the missing piece. I see these people displacing responsibility. They're blaming the sport, the process, what they did, without thinking maybe there was a better way to go about this, or maybe I went a little bit too fast too soon and I didn't build up the necessary confidence that would allow me to have the longevity. Maybe I was telling myself stories about this the whole time, like, oh, I hate this, this sucks, this is hard, that led me to believe this wasn't great. And it really bothers me when I see it on social media, the this was me, unhappy, unhealthy, dieting, and then winning trophies on stage. And it's like, okay, well, hold on a minute. You won. Like, can we just acknowledge the fact that, like, yes, you won, but you didn't have to take that approach to win. There's other approaches as well. And they'll
Yeah.
talk about their horror stories. And then they're like, well, now I don't diet, I rarely train, I don't care about what I put in my body. And I have I'm getting passionate because I have this serious problem, and I see this in the counseling field. When I applied for my master's degree, I was like, I want to change how mental health counselors approach competitors and bodybuilders and athletes, and in any sport that's especially physique or aesthetic driven, because what I see is an extreme approach to solve extreme problems. This doesn't work. If someone is struggling with an all or nothing mentality, or an extremist, or catastrophizing, all these types of actual mental struggles that they face, if we address that with something else more extreme, what are we teaching people? That they have to go to these extremes to fix it, and they never find the middle. So they don't ever believe that they can achieve this result unless they're going to an extreme. Like, I can't stand the all in approach. We saw that with a very famous influencer on YouTube promoting that. Couldn't stand that. I don't think that's healthy. Don't think that's right. And I'm sure from a physiological perspective, you could speak on how detrimental that could actually be to your body to do that, especially after dieting so deeply. But I'm 100% on board with that. I agree. Plus, are you really going to take advice from someone who, like, you don't know their full story, you don't know their full background, they're not exactly like you from that standpoint. So just because they look super lean and have abs and have muscles still, but they took this all-in approach, it's like, yeah, but they also were like ectomorph, or they also had a really fast metabolism, and them giving up food, like, it's no big deal. But if I did that, I have done it. Oof, that's not good. It's not the same. And it just promotes that dieting is bad and training is bad. All these things are so positive. It's how you view them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is no different than like getting promoted at your job. Like, I remember when I got promoted, like the people underneath of me were like, oh, he's only got that because he's close to the boss, and it's like, well, of course I am, because I perform well, I show up on time, I'm super dependable, I'd never been late or missed like a day at work. Like, of course I'm going to get promoted. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to. It just means that it might be a little bit longer time frame for them. But immediately I saw people try to cut me down based on my success. And we kind of see that. And that's why a lot of these people who are not successful are just really hungry to pull you down, or anonymously like spread misinformation to get people to stop doing what they couldn't do, because it's just kind of a reminder of their failure. Like, I never had that. I feel like, comparing it to guitar playing, I can see like 10-year-olds play way better than I could ever imagine playing. But to me, it's just really inspiring that I can probably be better than what I currently am. And you just have to have that right perspective. And I think I'll give people a little bit of credit and a little bit of leeway. That's really hard to do with your body, because it's so subjective. And music is very subjective too, because you'll see people getting these debates about like the best band and why. But really, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I would love to see these people that even failed at getting ready for competition is find beauty within themselves and who they are, and honestly their current body size, whatever it is. I do believe that fitness isn't the end all be all. Like, for me to be able to sit down and have a conversation in a room with somebody, even with the lights off, and just sit there without radio or TV on, means more to me than how they look. And if you're not fluent in bodybuilding, you're probably really great at a lot of other things, and this is what makes us great and unique as people. So, if anyone's saying I'm kind of hating and picking on that crowd, I do want to encourage that crowd to be their best selves.
Absolutely. I think there's a difference between loving your body for what it is and how it is, and like loathing through action in that process. Like, self-love is really an action. You need to nourish your body, you need to move your body. If that doesn't look like bodybuilding anymore, that's okay, but you still deserve to love yourself through action. And what we see more often than not is self-destruction, and it turns into, I'm just going to become I'm trying to be sensitive with my words, but I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to let go of myself. I'm going to just gain a ton of unhealthy fat and call it okay because I'm body positive. Body positivity should be taking care of your body and acknowledging that you deserve to feel good. That doesn't mean you have to go to extreme, back to the earlier point that people, address extremes with extremes. So they think the only way to be happy in their body is to go to an extreme. So I think it's great that you're promoting, like, also love yourself through that. If you're done with competing, that's fine. If you tried competing and it's not for you, that's fine. But let's not deter people who are really excited to try it or might benefit from it. And we can educate on the red flags or the risks of competing. And that's something that I do a lot is if someone's asking me about competing, I'm like, well, here's your risk factors. But everything has a risk factor. And there's also a lot of positive things we can do to prevent a risk factor. There's a risk factor to going and applying for a new job. There's a risk factor to getting into a relationship. There's risk factors in everything we do, but there's also things that can help you. And that's where we want to take the time to also say, what strengths do I have? What environment and community do I have that's going to help me through this? And what tools do I need in place to actually proactively prevent those risk factors from becoming the dominant story of this journey? There's things you won't change. Like competing is going to have you looking at your body differently. It is going to have you look at food differently. It's going to have you, be able to look at a plate and say, I know exactly the macros or at least close to it. But that's not a bad thing. It's really not. It's actually a beautiful thing that you can do if you're also staying in tune with your body, staying mindful of what your body needs from a nutritional side, staying aware of what is actually happening in your body so that it's not just about macros. It's not just about physique goals. It's my tagline, build more than just a body. You utilize this to build more than your physique.
Absolutely. I have a theory that, where people have a like body fat limit, and everyone's going to be a little bit more sensitive on where that is. And I kind of compare it to like touching a hot pan on a stove, but when it's too hot, everyone has a little bit of a different reflex on what they can handle. And I think that can fall into your homeostasis and your kind of set point, or, maybe you realize you're able to handle a lot of heat and maybe it's unhealthy for you too. If you start seeing some blood work come back negative, you may want to increase your reflex on taking your hand off the pan. So again, it's only when it impacts your health, whether it be mental or physical. And I have had girls where I've wanted them to gain more body fat and they're just like, I can't. And this is how I'm feeling. And, if you really want to control cortisol, sometimes you do have to give those clients a little bit, let them get a little bit leaner, get more comfortable, let you know that you're listening to them. I think that's key. They want to be heard. I'm uncomfortable. Will he help me through this? And it's not that I'm a yes man all the time, but you do have to individually find where the client needs to be heard, at least for a short amount of time. Let them do a mini cut. Sometimes I see girls get their cycle back with doing that because now they're not worried about reversing more and gaining even more weight. So sometimes we do that to correct and get a menstrual cycle, which is totally against the grain on, what you should do to do that. But stress is a factor. And if they're constantly stressed about how they're looking, that is definitely a tool that we can try and see if it induces that cycle within a 2-month time frame.
Absolutely. Like my hope for competitors and athletes would be that their mentality supports the champion they're trying to become. Like their mentality is representative of the version of themselves that wants the next level, that wants to be better, that shows up better. And their mentality allows them to grow into that, allows them to progress into that. And sometimes that is baby steps like that. Okay, we're a little uncomfortable. Let's step back. Okay, now we can push that uncomfortableness just a bit further next time and see how we do. And that's the same with food. It's the same with weight. It's exposure over time, and you gain comfort in that exposure. But it's unfortunate when the mind holds someone back from being really amazing because they're too afraid to gain. They're too afraid to lose, even like lose weight. That is, they're too afraid to gain weight, lose weight. Because I know people who have a history of especially anorexia, they are really nervous to get really lean because not only do they see in the mirror like a version of them that was once anorexic, because it can look pretty scary with a little bit more muscle, obviously, or a lot more in this case. But then you also have their family and their friends who are looking at them. They're like, your face looks like when you were struggling with this. So it goes both ways. And it takes us back to the point of this is intention. And I think that's going to be a key theme through a lot of this. Is like intention really matters. You're intentional as a coach, considering what are people's needs, what are they expressing to me, how do we make this a really positive journey for them. And
Mhm.
I'm really intentional about the mindset behind it. How do we get you to a place where you, as a person and a competitor, feel so fulfilled in this journey that you have the longevity to go where you really want to go, versus pushing it to a limit to try to get there quickly and then ended up not even enjoying the journey.
Absolutely. I have a good client story of somebody who I've been trying to get to eat more. We're trying to increase their off-season reflex a little bit or decrease it because they will always find a way. Like if I raise their food, they're like, my steps went up this week.
Uh-huh.
So we kind of started hitting those things. I usually don't do steps in off season, but I've had to with this person. And it was so funny because we pulled the training back where they're resting 2 days in a row. And she had asked, can I train back as my active rest day
What?
on Saturday? And I said, well, an active rest day for you is just called training because I want to, not necessarily an active rest, right?
Correct.
Like, good point. And sometimes I kind of hate that word active rest because it's perpetuating the problem and making it allowable. I don't use that vocabulary in my training at all. An active rest. It's just such a horrible buzzword because you should be resting, not being active. So that whole concept makes no sense at all.
Yeah, it's another form of obsession and a fixation. And that is the kind of stuff that can lead to disordered thought patterns and behaviors. Like, it's not normal to feel like you need to earn the food that's on your plan through movement. It's not healthy to feel like if you don't work out, you're going to gain all this weight. I actually had a client recently who or potential client who turned client, and I sent them that image of like the actual total daily energy expenditure and how impactful exercise is. And I'm like, the more you're doing this, like, one, you're not even burning that many calories. And two, you're then taking away your body's ability to rest and re-nourish and rebuild. So you can burn more calories during the day just because you're actually building the muscle, or you're giving yourself the time to rest versus forcing it. And I love that you make it so clear you don't do active rest days. It doesn't make sense. It's a contradiction. And I would encourage people, if you are one of those types who thinks you need to earn all your food or you can't take rest day, I would get help. I would talk to someone, whether it's me or somebody else, like talk to someone about that. Talk to your coach about it, because you need to be able to practice taking rest. It's an important part of being an elite athlete. It's an important part of being a healthy human being, let alone an athlete, right? So I think it's great that you were able to encourage her down that road. And also, another good example you use, like, now you're using steps tracking with her. But in other cases, you wouldn't use it because it becomes obsessive. But in this case, it makes sense because it's a controlled variable where like, she's not going to go over that to try to compensate.
Absolutely. It's the same back in the day. I dealt with people who would say cheat meal or a clean cheat, like that was okay
Clean cheese.
with clean food. And I just said, why don't we just call this an untracked day? That is such horrible, verbiage for us to be using.
I love that. No, I think that the untracked, when you introduce refeed, and like that included like specific macros for me to hit in the prep, I loved that. And even post show too, I thought that was so awesome. And it just I loved it because of the data and the purposefulness. And then now, like, being deeper in improvement season, being able to have an untracked day or an untracked meal, it's nice too, because like, you can become obsessive with MyFitnessPal. And that's also where, like, what we talked about last time, sometimes a meal plan is a great break from the tracking and the fixation. Like one of my clients recently was like, I want to talk to my coach about doing a meal plan. And so we were going over her intentions behind that and what that meant. She's like, I'm just so obsessed with the numbers and I just want to like relearn. And she didn't have the base of learning meal timing. She didn't have the base of learning, not that meal timing is that important, or meal combination more so. And she didn't have the base of knowing like what's going to be best or make me feel best. So she's just been macro tracking this whole time, kind of trying to learn on her own. So she thought it would be interesting to have a meal plan and see how those choices make her feel or those recommendations make her feel. And I think that's a great example of when it's not a disordered thought of I need that to have more control or be better. It's more of a positive intention of I just want to learn more for my body, for myself, and my life.
Absolutely. You can shift within the two so well as long as the psychology is important. Or, you put something on someone's meal plan they don't like, at least just teach them how to change it or, change it for them. And they can start kind of seeing how those numbers work. Obviously, this person already knew that since they tracked macros. Sometimes the meal plan's just simpler for people to follow. And that's okay. Sometimes you need that point where you're just not thinking about food. Janine and I have
Mhm.
tried macros a few times and we always revert back to the meal plan for her. It just works so much better. And I'm happy with that for her. And she does have some flexibility in the off season. And we just have a really good system down.
Absolutely. That's what it's about. Like the perspective or the thought process that a lot of this is so unhealthy or not good for us mentally is an unfortunate story that's told by, like you brought up earlier, people who've done it and didn't succeed, or maybe did it in a way that wasn't very conducive to their own needs, or maybe they didn't prep their minds for this or take care of their minds throughout the process. And it's a good reminder that you can do this sport without sacrificing your mental health. And when we present that to people, my hope is that they'll see like my dreams are possible, my goals are possible, because there's an ability to mitigate risks, to mitigate problems. Even if you've actually had diagnosis of disordered eating in the past or body image issues in the past, doesn't mean this will exacerbate it. It could mean that it'll actually make it better. It could mean your perspective will change, only if you're willing to change the thought process behind it.
If you're willing to learn about it too, I think that's absolutely key. And you'll either get a feel for it or, you're still going to need those numbers to guide you. And that's okay. I kind of like bringing music theory into it. Sometimes people play by ear, sometimes people need the scales to know where they fall, within, you know, matching the chords with the scales. And that's okay because there's great musicians that do it both ways. There's great competitors that either track or do meal plans. And it's just what vibes with them best on their understanding and their mindset.
100%. Like there, I had someone on the podcast who does intuitive eating, even in her prep, and that shocked me. I was like, how do you do that? But it's what I've learned is what people will call, again, going to labels. Some people will call it intuitive eating. And so then the buzzword behind that is like you just eat when you're hungry, you stop when you're full, and you don't restrict. But I think what's more important is a mindfulness based eating strategy where you know what your body needs, you're considerate of what your goals are. You're not force feeding necessarily, but sometimes you do it if you know it's going to benefit your goals. And I think that's important that mindfulness based eating strategies are a like I think it should be a prerequisite to any program, any plan, and it should be incorporated in every plan. Like if you don't know what it means to eat mindfully, maybe just practice setting your food or setting your utensil down while you eat and like breathing and enjoying the food, focusing on the tastes and textures. You can also mitigate the risk of attaching to perfection with meal plans or clean eating by incorporating all sorts of different types of foods or new recipes or products even, and see how you feel on them, and kind of train yourself to know that it's okay. Like You can have white rice, you don't have to have brown rice or whatever, this apple instead of this apple. So I think it's important that the education, as you said, you learn, and also personal education through mindfulness-based eating, where you learn how these foods are actually affecting you personally.
Absolutely. Also, for listeners to keep in mind, either some macro tracking or meal planning is probably required. And I would say probably meal planning, then macro tracking, then intuitive eating. I like to call it intelligent eating versus intuitive. I think
Exactly.
that once you do that, it kind of just immediately teaches you what intuitive eating is versus reading the book. But yeah, intelligent eating. And I imagine this person had a long history of meal plans or macro tracking
Probably.
doing that. So
Yeah, exactly. So I think that kind of covers everything. I mean, from how we view ourselves, the types of people we're surrounding ourselves with, and then of course our intentions and our thought processes behind what we're eating and what we're doing, and really knowing that you can achieve your goals as a competitor without sacrificing your mental health, so long as you're willing to do what is sustainable and also challenging, with the mentality that you can get better, you can improve, and you're monitoring responses both psychologically and physiologically with your coach, so you can make the proper adjustments to be successful.
absolutely. It was
Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. It's always great being on here with you.
I know, I feel like we can literally talk forever. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again soon with more topics, and we'll look forward to chatting soon.